It's time to be woke. Take off your shades. It helps see through the smoke. Cause the wicked hide behind the cloak. And if you stay in the mist, you gon' be soaked. So listen up, cause this hair of the dog. What's real, what ain't? Is this the fog or smog? Cause there's a difference when you breathe it in. So don't let the corporate media take you for a spin. This that morning show, they put you in the know. So I hope that you ready, cause all we do is go, go, go. Yeah, come get your info, you gon' be like, whoa. Hair of the dog, we bout that, ayy. We in the zone, we out here, yeah. Speeding the
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Hair of the Dog. I'm Andy Kennedy. It is Friday morning. Lovely day here in Canada in April as the grass starts to grow and the birds start to chirp and all that good stuff. Welcome to Fuck It Friday. We are getting ready for a fun weekend here at my house of maintenance and working outside because Mother Nature decided to stop snowing on us, and that's always a good thing for me. Anyway, we got a great show for you. We have a special guest today, and we have some wonderful things to talk about, and that starts with my introduction of my lovely and talented co-host, Ms. Kerri Barber. Good morning, Kerri.
Hey, good morning, Andy. I appreciate it. And let's be honest, Nurse Deb has a long to-do list for you. So
yes, I know, but she's currently taking some time off, so she's doing it herself. So there.
Oh, that's impressive. Way to go. Shout out to Nurse Deb. So yeah, I'm really excited about this particular show because this is a subject that's near and dear to me. I'm from insurance and advocacy background. So this one is really important, particularly for progressives who support Medicare for all. This is one more piece of it that you need to understand, particularly when the third way Dems and conservatives are floating this public option. Public option is actually expansion of Medicaid. So you need to understand exactly what they're trying to sell you. And I think that this particular story that we're going to tackle today is definitely going to illuminate some of this background detail for you. So please stay tuned for that. But first, thank you to everyone who's tuning in today on our Friday. You could be anywhere else, but you're here. So thank you. We are live and interactive. So if you type a comment, particularly on Facebook or YouTube, Twitter, we'll see it. And we want you to join the conversation. Push back, agree, share your thoughts and ideas. This is we all family. So there's that. But two shout outs that I want to give this morning. First to Ron Pacone. Ron Pacone had an episode, I think it was yesterday, about the FCC and net neutrality. You remember net neutrality? Well, the Biden administration is now putting in new nominees to that committee, and we hope that they will reverse the whole net neutrality debacle. So Ron Pacone had a guest on who was talking about who the fifth nominee was and all that entails. So I put a link in the chat this morning so that you can go out and watch that, but I didn't see anyone else talking about that particular thing. And then this was a request that I had, the second one. Tucker Carlson. Why the hell do we care about what Tucker Carlson is doing? So the comment came to me like, why is mainstream media, corporate-owned media, all about Tucker Carlson and making him the punching bag? Who gives a shit what Tucker is doing? And it is my opinion that now that Orange Man Bad is gone, we have to have a new foil. And so Tucker's it. So that is why we're pushing against it. And I think
yes, and I believe his father was Russian and his mother was Chinese.
Oh yeah, so yeah, just whatever you want to pin on somebody. And this is if you go to journalism school, they always talk about when you write your stories, you got to have a protagonist and an antagonist, and how that works in good journal, not necessarily journal, more like PR and propaganda. And that's what you're seeing with the Tucker Carlson, because nobody gives a shit what Tucker's doing. And, Papa Bear is long gone with his little escapades. So you got to have somebody new. And what better way than to support, and I use that word purposely, support Tucker, your buddy, than to give him free press. And that is exactly what's happening. So yeah, disagree with that, or, weigh in on the comments. Am I wrong? But I feel like that is exactly what they're trying to do. So yeah, those things. So we have a lot to talk about this morning, but first, even thinking about it cracks me up. We have a new ad out, and I want to debut it live here this morning. It's hilarious. So, Andy, could you please do the honors?
I suppose.
A voice for those who need to be heard, and stories that corporate-owned media won't cover. For an objective, ethical approach to journalism that you won't find anywhere else.
Hair of the Dog.
100% publicly funded and independently owned. We bring you stories built on integrity and accuracy without the corporate media slant. In our first year, we broke 6 major news stories, and we're just getting started. Become a Patreon donor today, and together we can keep the conversation relevant and undiluted. Help change the media landscape now at patreon.com/Hair
of the Dog Show. Wow, she has a deep voice.
Oh, that one just cracks me up. It cracks me up. So if you're tuning in here on your Friday morning, there you go, world premiere of a new ad, and I love it to pieces. It's hilarious.
It exudes professionalism.
Right. Well, okay, so this is along the lines of a complete marketing campaign, and Andy so far has not he's not on board with this photo campaign that I want to do for Instagram. There's this hashtag about Instagram influencers, and there are all these gorgeous, beautiful women, and I want to put one out for Andy, and he's just...
I don't even know how to take that.
Anyway, so that's, yeah, and support independent media. Appreciate it. So, okay, without further ado, I want to introduce our guest. This is someone that we've had on the show before, who is a phenomenal resource for economic issues, for federal policy, how things work. She's worked on a really good series as an introduction for the layperson on antitrust laws and the Sherman Act. So we'll have some links posted here in just a minute to all of the stuff that she's working on. But today's topic, we had to bring on a heavy hitter. So thank you so much, Ms. Sherry Weiss. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Thanks, Kerri. Hi, Andy. I'm not sure if I'm a heavy hitter, but I can probably answer a few questions.
She's modest too. I love it. I love it. No.
You sure you're not Canadian?
Pennsylvania Dutch.
Oh, okay, so you could be then.
Yeah, pretty close. Pretty close. So, hey, good morning, Amber. Amber says, good morning, my lovelies, and good morning, Miss Sherry. So Sherry's got her own fan club. So
good morning, Amber.
Yeah, this further bolsters the heavy hitter. So so let's get right into it. Andy, this is the first graphic with antitrust, just a really basic piece on what antitrust is for the layperson, because we got to set the groundwork just a little bit on what this actually is, so people understand where this came about. And this is from the Sherman Act of 1890. 1890. We recognize that maybe you shouldn't have monopolies and things like that. And it was meant for, you hear about that ubiquitous free market. Well, free market is created by government regulations, right? Think of it as like a boxing ring. It's the government that creates that space and makes sure that everybody plays fairly. This allows for competition, for innovation, all of these sorts of things. So with the Sherman Act, it outlawed every contract combination or conspiracy in restraint of trade, and any monopolization, attempted monopolization, or conspiracy or combination to monopolize. So we know that monopolies squeeze out competition, raise rates without any outside influence, and it's just really bad for innovation and the consumer, right? So compare it to your self-service here as opposed to in Europe. Europe, they have 35 providers, so you end up paying for full internet, high-speed broadband internet, and your cell phone a fraction of what we pay here in the US because they have more competition and they have adequate regulation. So the Federal Trade Commission Act bans unfair methods of competition and unfair or deceptive acts and practices. So Sherry, all of this is kind of complicated for a Friday morning, but the Federal Trade Commissions Act, they're tasked with enforcing the Sherman Act and everything that went along with it. Do I have that right?
Yeah, it's actually the Department of Justice also now enforces the Sherman Antitrust Act and other antitrust acts. The Federal Trade Commission has its own specific act that actually enabled the commission to exist and gives it authority. And what has happened over the years is that Department of Justice, the industries sort of have been divided up, and I'm not quite sure exactly how they made that decision or what all gets covered by what. But between the two, they pretty much cover the economy. So the Department of Justice takes care of certain industries, and the Federal Trade Commission takes care of other ones. But between the two of them, Sherman Antitrust Act can be enforced across the board.
Okay, perfect. All right, so that sets the groundwork for this example that has apparently been going on for years. We are just now finding out about, and that's typically how it works when you have massive corporations behaving badly. We don't get to hear about it until, as consumers, we've already been duped and screwed out of our paychecks. So we find out after it. So what I'm talking about, Andy, if I might impose, this is the Blue Cross Blue Shield Association slide. So it has come to light that the Blue Cross Blue Shield Association, which is not one company, but a group of companies across the United States and some international places, that is the association. Blue Cross Blue Shield is a brand. It is a logo and a trademark. That's it. So what happened was in October of 2020, the association settled a massive multi-year lawsuit. I think this thing went back 2 decades, and it was brought by, I believe the gentleman was just a little chiropractor out in New York who got tired of this. And so he was pissed off enough to hire a lawyer and pursue this case for almost 2 decades. And what happened was they actually just settled. The reason they settled was a judge in the Northern District of Alabama decided to reject Blue Cross's latest motion to dismiss it and said that the case could go forward. So the association, Blue Cross Association, went, okay, we don't want to go to court. We don't want to have to give up our goods and all of this. So we're just going to settle. So they settled for $2.67 billion with a B. That is their settlement in order to get this case resolved. So part of the settlement was not only the fund that they set up, but they promised to make some changes to members in the association and their business model. Whether they actually do it, I don't know. But I'm still waiting to find all of the details of what the settlement entails, and we may never get that. But I'm going to keep pursuing it because this is so important in the context of this global pandemic and what was going on, how people were trying to access insurance, the rates that they are paying. So for those of you who are not necessarily fans of the ACA, this is particularly important because we saw rates rising and everyone, it's the easy answer to say it was ACA that did it. No, these are for-profit insurance companies who took the lead, and based on this lawsuit, we're dividing up the country amongst their little members and raising rates arbitrarily. That's what was happening. And that isn't that the definition of antitrust, Sherry?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you mind if I back up a little bit and give a little history on a couple of things? For one thing, I didn't realize this until you brought this issue up to me, Kerri, and I started doing a little research of my own. Turns out that there was an act that was passed in 1945 when FDR was basically, right at the end of his life. He signed it. It's called the McCarran-Ferguson, I think, Act, and it actually exempted health insurance companies from antitrust regulation. And so that was kind of an eye-opener. And so what that means is that the federal government really didn't have the authority to investigate insurance companies for anti-competitive activity under the Sherman Antitrust Act. And I'm not sure if that applies to the FTC Act as well. But and so what happened was, in the case of this chiropractor, he filed a class action lawsuit. And what a class action lawsuit is when an individual or a group of individuals, typically it means a group with a certain common interest, like consumers, file a lawsuit as a unit. And that actually is something that we didn't even have the ability to do until into the 1960s. And so one of the things that's important for people to understand is this part of the conservative agenda that some people are supporting is actually trying to get rid of class action lawsuits. So that's not a good thing. So anyway, what happened was now apparently, and I'm not sure exactly what all the reasons for this is, but it's most likely due to COVID. The fact that many people were not allowed to, have optional surgery or surgery that wasn't an emergency right away. That meant that a lot of the health insurance companies, weren't expending money on procedures that couldn't get done because of the COVID problem. And so their profits were record high this last year. And I'm not sure what all else the issue is, but apparently that caused Congress, and Trump actually signed it, to pass a law called the acronym is Chira. But and I can't remember offhand what it is, but it basically says that the federal government can now go after health insurance companies. Now,
let's be clear here. So, all right, if this next question is a little too close to home, that's okay. You can sidestep it. But just because they can, do we see that they're doing it? Because usually the federal government leaves it to the states. Every state is supposed to have a Department of Insurance that's supposed to be the state watchdog. We've seen them asleep at the wheel or outright, like, you and I had discussed earlier in Florida, where they pretty much got rid of their state Department of Insurance. So do you actually expect now that the Fed is going to start taking a look at this, or is this just too complicated?
Well, I think that there is a changed attitude these days. And one of the things is that the antitrust, a lot of this has been spurred by the tech monopolies. Antitrust has just becoming more and more of an issue because there's been this increasing awareness of the problems that lack of enforcement of antitrust policy is causing in this country. So we see concentration across the economy in many areas, and it actually does contribute to increased inequality for income for people. One thing I do want to note is that states actually also enforce antitrust, and some of them can be very, very aggressive. And so, I'm not sure what all kinds of different antitrust suits there may have been at the state level dealing with health insurance companies, if any. But the federal government isn't the only source. It's just that the federal government is a big heavy hitter, and it can go at a national level. So.
Okay, perfect. And I do have some references to the state action against these for-profit insurance companies. We'll get into that in just a little bit. But Andy, if you wouldn't mind, the next slide, please. This is Blue Cross Blue Shield Association with the logos on it. So there's a part of this antitrust lawsuit that I want people to understand, because we're under, as consumers, we tend to misunderstand how insurance works. So with this one, I wanted to explain why the antitrust lawsuit came to be for this particular company. So Blue Cross Blue Shield is ubiquitous, and you just know it. And I'll admit that the executives there, when it came to the rollout of ACA, their response was, well, we really don't have to do any advertising or education of customers because they know the brand, they trust us. And it was that attitude, while all of this shenanigans was going on, that really got to the heart of the issue of for-profit insurance, at least in my mind, because they were saying people trust us. We don't really have to do anything to facilitate that trust. We're just known. And this is what the association markets off of. So across the country, you have thousands of insurance companies. These are small, large, whatever. They're health management organizations. They either work with clinics or they work with nursing homes, all of these companies that deal with some aspect of healthcare. They can petition and apply to have the Blue Cross brand, and they pay some money for that. It's like a franchise. So with that, they join the association and they pay into the association. So the association itself is headquartered in Chicago. So if you were participating in any of the Medicare for All rallies or any of these ongoing things, you were doing it in front of this Blue Cross Blue Shield Association building downtown Chicago. So what happened is, as part of this, is Blue Cross for the last 30 years had been taking all of these companies that wanted to have their logo and their trademark and saying, okay, all of you in Illinois, there's too many of your companies, so we're going to facilitate either a merger or we're going to withhold the trademark from these companies. We want to consolidate. And that's what they did on a massive scale. And it was across all the states and including some international organizations as well. So that in and of itself, these kind of mergers are not necessarily antitrust, right, Chira? Any franchisee can consolidate a little bit.
Well, a merger, if a merger reaches a certain level of industry concentration, that's when it can draw the attention of the antitrust authorities. However, a couple of things. For one thing, at the federal level, the health insurance companies didn't have to deal with that. And historically, Blue Cross was a nonprofit. And so now, of course, as you know, that's been actually changing, and they have been sort of creating some companies, sort of umbrella companies that actually are for profit. But it sort of has this goodwill, Blue Cross. So let's see. I'm sorry.
Oh no, it was a very complex question. So based on the lawsuit and the discovery that came out, they managed trademarks in 170 countries in the world territories and things like this. So it's also the Blue Crescent and things like that. But so So the difference between consolidation and then what they are actually accused of doing was manipulating the market to force consolidation and then setting regional districts. So you, Mr. Customer, who want to license our name, that's fine. You're going to take over the Northeast region and you can set your prices. So they were actually coordinating across the entire association, it's nationwide, to go from, I think it was 1,300 contracts down to about 5 or 7. So you no longer have that price competition that, you know, the free market is supposed to brand for us.
Yeah. And I mean, basically it's cartel-like behavior. It's collusion. And I mean, that's what it sounds like to me. I'm not a lawyer, but that certainly sounds like what it is to me. And it seems to me that this is the kind of thing that the DOJ or the FTC at least should look into. But if they didn't have the authority, then they couldn't. Now, as I said, maybe states could, but if they, if they're talking about over big regions that, are beyond the states, that might get trickier. You could have groups of attorney generals. You could have groups of states filing claims, but I think it's probably something that just kind of went under the radar for various reasons. And then, of course, there is also the change in antitrust policy implementation that has happened since basically 1980. And so basically what has happened is we used to be a lot more aggressive about antitrust policy enforcement, and we have not been in the last 4 years.
Okay, so we have a comment come in from Ridge Runner, and I'm happy to address this, or Sherry, you can speculate. So this is the opinion of Ridge Runner, saying a lot of this diversification, and I think you mean lack of diversification when we're talking about mergers, but he says a lot of this diversification was because of the ACA. Most insurance plans couldn't survive, especially the nonprofit aspect. And here's where I want to push back on that, Ridge. Number one, there was only one state that had a non-for-profit health insurance provider. And that was a company called Land of Lincoln. And this company was started by people who were part of HHS and CMS at a federal level under the Obama administration, who were themselves supporters of a public option. They got with the state of Illinois and their insurance department and tried to create a non-for-profit insurance carrier. And they were working really well. I know this because at the time I was licensed in insurance, was paying very close attention to them, and they were in competition with a company like Blue Cross Blue Shield. What happened was Blue Cross Blue Shield happened to have some friends in the state legislature, and they were able to make sure that this company went away. So that is the only state that I am familiar with that had a non-for-profit health insurance company in the works post-ACA. The rest of them are all for-profit. And that happened back in the late 80s, where they went over to the for-profit model. So maybe I don't understand your question a little bit. This assertion that ACA actually did that. Okay, so Ridge says, by diversification, I meant these companies creating sub-companies underneath themselves. Not true to a point. So when you look at this particular lawsuit, and I did post the link, so I invite you to go out and look at that. These companies were already in existence for the most part, most of them. Some did come about because of new opportunities in the retiree market. So yeah, a lot of them were already in existence. And again, this is just licensing of the brand. And the lawsuit itself actually points to where Blue Cross administration at the association level was pushing them for consolidation because of these contracts. So, and then Jim Bird says antitrust issues are mostly non-existent in all areas thanks to the watering down of regulations. And I think that's the point that you're making, Sherry, is that
Yeah. Mhm.
okay.
Yeah.
So what is the feel now? What kind of sense are you getting with the new administration and all of these things? What's it feel like with these agencies? Can you speak to any of that or
Yeah. Yeah. Well, for one thing, there is a woman by the name of Elena Khan who is a lawyer, and she has really been making a name for herself in the antitrust legal profession as being really kind of a warrior against the way we have been enforcing antitrust policy. And actually, Joe Biden nominated her for the Federal Trade Commission. And so she will be, if she gets, if she gets confirmed, she will be a great person at that agency. And so that's a really, really positive sign. So that's a good thing. There's also, there's just been a lot of, maybe not in economics, there hasn't been as much as there should have been. But I think they're in more and more in law. There's increasing pushback against the sort of the philosophy of the law and economics that we've been using since 1980. That really has resulted in the lack of enforcement. And that philosophy was basically put in place, or it was theorized and proposed by Robert Bork, who, I don't know if you recall, he actually was a nominee for the Supreme Court under Reagan. He did not get accepted, and there was a big controversy. And after that, for a while, whenever someone was not confirmed, the media referred to them as having been borked. And so he became a verb.
Nice.
Wasn't Robert Bork the one that Nixon turned to
Yes.
to fire the people in order to get okay just wanted to make sure that we were talking about the same guy.
The Saturday Night Massacre. It is the exact same Robert Bork. Robert Bork was a disciple of a lawyer by the name of Robert Posner, and he was somebody who really kind of developed the law and economics field. But the problem is the economics that they used to develop that field was very strict neoclassical economics.
Our favorite.
Yes, our favorite.
Right.
And basically they were mentored both by Milton Friedman.
Yeah.
And so Bork's philosophy of antitrust law is very free market based. Essentially, really what they were trying to do is get rid of antitrust law.
So here's my question
really
when it comes to neoclassical economics, and Andy, correct me if I'm wrong, but if you say the free market will take care of itself, but then on the other hand, you're working to dismantle the protections of that free market, aren't you just a hypocrite?
Well, I think that's the short definition of capitalism. Right.
Okay.
I am listening to what you guys are talking about without having a lot of knowledge of it, obviously, but saying that every time you say health insurance company, you put a big bank in there and talk about the great financial crisis, right?
Yeah.
It's the exact same thing. It's bad actors under Gresham's dynamic, bad actors, that are forcing good actors out of business because they are allowed to to act badly without any consequences, and the government doing their bidding by deregulating. We saw that in the 30s with Obama, with the basically dismantling of Glass-Steagall, and Dodd-Frank coming in as the banking separation between the securities industry and the banking industry, that wall coming down. And the same thing that happened that created the Great Depression in 29, that created the savings and loan crisis in the late 90s, came into play exactly the same way in 2008, right? And it is just the industry behaving badly and the government backstopping them financially to bail them out, and nobody goes to prison.
Gotcha. Yeah. Okay. So I think I'm on the same page now. So let's take that in context. And I'm putting you both at a disadvantage. And I get that. But Andy, this is the last slide with the pie chart on it. Here's what I'm looking at, right? We had this massive $1 billion settlement from one of the largest brands in the country, who has now, they have not admitted wrongdoing, but we know it was an antitrust lawsuit, which affects all of us, right? You can't not get healthcare. And the only way to get access to it in this country is through a private for-profit insurer. And I can hear people going, but wait, Medicare, Medicaid, stop. And I need you to understand this, because I keep seeing this over and over again. Private for-profit companies manage both Medicare and Medicaid. And these same companies, and Chira, you brought it up, states do prosecute, not as much as the Department of Justice did. So I went back and did just a basic search because I knew these things existed. I found 12 different lawsuits, either by the DOJ in cooperation with the states or the DOJ themselves. And I only went back to 2017. I know there are more that exist, but here's just a kind of a snapshot of what's going on. So you had a whistleblower lawsuit. This was huge. In 2020, it was fraud by Cigna, their Medicare Advantage plan. So this is the majority of seniors, and I don't have the exact statistics, but if you're on Medicare over 65, most people go to an Advantage plan because it's just easier. I don't have to worry about it. But we see year over year, company over company, and after this consolidation with Cigna and Blue Cross and Anthem, now you only have a few companies who are still engaging in fraudulent activity with their own customers, particularly those who are on a fixed income. And so this is part of where the antitrust piece comes in, at least in my mind, particularly when we're talking about expanding the public option and putting people towards Medicaid, expanding Medicaid across. Number one, you have great swaths across this country where nobody accepts Medicaid as an insurance plan. So you would just literally have a contract that does nothing. And then, oh, by the way, we have these bad actors who have been hit again and again with fraud, and now this massive antitrust. And these are the same companies and their subsidiaries. So Ridge, when you mentioned the subsidiaries and consolidation, they're still independent private companies. They just happen to have these brands that are aligned to them because it's good marketing. So all of these folks are now engaging in fraud and antitrust action. So what could we look forward to? I'm going to have you put on your prediction hat here, Sherry. If we expand Medicaid and we have, like, I don't know, I have a neighbor who keeps stealing from me, and now I'm going to give them the keys to my house. Do you foresee any issue with these private for-profit companies who, just, let's be honest, 2.6 billion is not a lot to Blue Cross Blue Shield International. It's not.
Yeah. Well, I can't really predict because I don't do predictions, but I think we can think about what logical outcomes there might be. If the industry isn't regulated, They're going to do what is most profitable. And, if they don't have to serve people that they think are unprofitable, they won't. I think one of the big problems that we have is that really there's, as I've discussed with you already, Kerri, there are so many market failures in our medical system, and that's not, nobody's at fault. There's no fault for any of it. It's just when you actually look at what the description of a competitive market is, basically every aspect of the medical industry fails in that definition. There's just market failures everywhere. Really what we have is a situation where really medical care, in my opinion, should be considered a public good and provided by the government. Probably the federal government would be best. The reason for that is it's just, if you allow the free market to continue, or what is called a free market, but what really isn't, if you allow this to continue, basically it just doesn't serve the public. And we really need antitrust regulation if this is going to continue. But the most efficient economic outcome, most efficient and most equitable would be to have a single payer system with the federal government as a single payer.
So by single, okay. So I want to get back to that, but real quick, Jim just offered something. Jim says private company now manages Medicaid here in Iowa, and costs have ballooned out of control, and nothing is being said by our politicians responsible for the swamp. Sorry that happened, Jim, but that's exactly an example of what we're talking about across the board here.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. I have a question.
Yeah.
Can we actually consider the fraudulent behavior of these companies as a pre-existing condition?
Well, that's the point. Yeah, they keep behaving badly. So, Sherry, to your point, let's explore that a little bit. So the federal government right now, under HHS and CMS, they don't do anything but monitor and report on statistics and regulations. They don't do anything when it comes to implementing contracts or things like that. It's actually a private company that distributes reimbursement rates for Medicare and Medicaid. So what would that look like? Are you talking about a pencil pusher in DC now manages healthcare? What is this?
Oh, no. No, we're just talking about payments. In a way you can think about, my husband made this comment, and I hope, I don't know if I get myself in trouble saying this, but honestly, if you nationalized Blue Cross, that might be one option. Basically, so it would basically, the single payer system is basically who pays the bills. That's all it is. Now, you can have a system of a national health service like they have in England that they're trying to destroy. Some people are trying to destroy. But, and that's where basically the medical people are employees of the government. That's one option. But another that probably would work better for us, at least in a transitional period, if nothing else, is basically for the federal government to take over the payments, just like, it's basically like Medicare, the part that the government pays for. So that's, it would be the simplest and most efficient system, because we have this super complicated system right now. Like you said, you have with Blue Cross, you have this umbrella organization, these different umbrella organizations. And then you have these other organizations underneath that. These are all people, this is all like an infrastructure. And I think there's something like 1,000 people that work in Chicago. And now they're not even providing health insurance. They're just kind of, I assume, I may be wrong about this, but basically dealing with the coordination and everything of the different Blue Cross companies. And so you have all these middle people that are really not even providing a service, but they're collecting a lot of money.
Right.
They have to live, so they get paid.
Right.
And, so there is a huge amount of there's a huge amount of middle people that are really not providing medical care. And they are a big cost to the system. And they really we do not need to have a system set up that way.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's right. And what is my thing? What have I always said about the Biden administration, right? If you want to think that they've been moved to the left, the one indicator that says that is if they make a decision or bring in a policy that costs their donor class money, right? And to that point, we haven't seen that yet. And why was Biden so adamant against Medicare for all as a policy? It's because the health industry is all of those rich pharmaceutical and health insurance companies all stand to lose a ton of money, and they contribute a ton of money to election campaigns.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So just real quick, if you happen to be a Blue Cross Blue Shield insured person from 2007 to present, and this is either you bought it on the marketplace or your employer had it, or you bought it outright for yourself, you can participate in the settlement. So I posted 2 links. There's a FAQ on the Blue Cross page and how to join the settlement. So let's be clear, when it's a class action settlement over 2 decades, the bulk of the settlement is going to go to the attorneys. But if you want to participate, maybe get a check. They do specify that anybody who gets a check for less than $5 probably won't get that check, but you can sign on. Now, here's the caveat, which I thought was pretty interesting. If you do choose to sign on, then you are now waiving your rights to bring any private lawsuit that you may have, any claim, any standing, all of it is gone if you sign on to this. But on the flip side, most of us, we can't afford rent next month, let alone an attorney for our own lawsuits. So you're going to have to weigh that option for yourself, decide if you want to sign on to it or not. So
are you going to choose what's behind door number 1 or
right.
door number 2?
And yeah, that's exactly right. So we are just about out of time here. So Sherry, thank you so much. You have this knack for taking a complex, confusing issue like antitrust and really boiling it down to something that's knowable and understandable for the general public. And in this context, I so appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I know it's a complicated subject, and it's some of it is intentional, especially by the people who have a tendency to not like antitrust. So some of it is probably, I think, meant to confuse. And certainly, actually, when you think about it, look at health insurance benefits programs. Those things are meant to confuse. I'm an employee of the federal government, and as such, I have a range of options of insurance to choose from. It is so complicated trying to make a comparison between them because they have all kinds of different things that they cover. And, they'll cover maybe 35, one company will cover 35% of some procedure, and another will cover 100%, but not have some other thing that you want. And it's just a huge, just a gigantic mass of information that you just can't really process as a person. Well, that is a good way to make prices ultimately. Your final ultimate price of cost of health insurance is unclear, and it's really hard to determine. And so, that is no doubt intentional.
I totally agree with you. And I think that as consumers, we forget that a health insurance policy is a financial vehicle. It's a contract for financing. It has literally nothing to do with the outcome of your health outcomes and treatments. So we often confuse the two because one was a gateway to another, but they're not the same thing. And you're right, it's a legal contract. So of course it's going to have a whole lot of loopholes in there, including, they're supposed to be capped at a certain amount of profit. But yeah, if you're comparing the numbers to revenue, and I did include a link for anybody who's watching to compare their revenue and their profits, it's way more than 20%. And so how is that happening under ACA? That doesn't make any sense. But so that's a show for another time. So thank you, Miss Sherry. And
okay. Can I just say one thing?
Yeah, please.
All my opinions are my own, and I do not represent the government when I talk about any of this stuff. So I just want to make that clear.
Thank you. Very good. Yeah,
and just a quick fun fact. Do you know how the Sherman Act got its name? Well, let me tell you. The insurance companies went to the government and said, you don't have to regulate us. You can trust us. We won't behave badly. We promise. And the government was like, sure, man.
That was great. That was great. Thank you, Andy, for that. And so
I didn't hear that one before.
He makes this up on the fly. He's so clever. So, thank you to Jim. Jim, let us know if you decide to sign on to this lawsuit. And then thank you, Amber. She says, thank you, everyone. This was fantastic. We appreciate you, Amber. We appreciate you. So yeah, that's all I got. Andy, do you have any more words of wisdom?
Any more deadly serious additions to the show? No, I'm just as interested to get the weekend started as you and Sherry are, I'm sure. So I say, let's call it. Excellent. What do you think? Good job. Thank you, Sherry, for coming on. It's always a pleasure to talk to you about this stuff. Kerri,
thank you, Andy.
You guys both enjoy your weekends, and we will see you bright and early on Monday morning. Take care.
We bout that, we in the zone. We out here, spitting the facts, how it's supposed to be. Hair of the dog, we keeping it G.